Lost in History 1984 reconstructed by Gunisha Kaur, audiobook for Chapter 3. Building of Tensions. The American Supreme Court ruled in the infamous Skokie case that the Constitution's First Amendment protected even the neo-Nazis' right to march through an area of Holocaust survivors of Illinois carrying swastikas. Here, in the largest democracy of the world, we are not even allowed to hear complaints of heinous human rights crimes from the people whom the state has decreed to disappear in total obscurity. A state that deems the victims of human rights crimes to be too ignoble even to be heard should at least stop pretending that it respects their citizenship. Committee for Coordination on Disappearance in Punjab. After 18 years of struggle for a homeland, the Sikhs were granted a dissected and repartitioned Punjab. However, due to dissension in the political party of the Sikhs, the Akali Dal, the party split in 1960. One faction was led by Tara Singh, the hero of the independence movement, and one headed by Fateh Singh, president of the Shiromani Akali Dal. The split led to disunity among the populace, further minimizing the political influence of the Sikhs. In 1975, the Allahabad High Court found Prime Minister Indira Gandhi guilty of election fraud and ordered her to resign from her seat in office. Rather than complying with the judgment, Mrs. Gandhi coerced the President of India to declare a national emergency which allowed her to rule by decree, postpone state and parliamentary elections indefinitely, and suspend civil liberties. Though the declaration of emergencies allowed her to defy the verdict of the High Court ruling and retain power, the suspension of civil liberties and human rights incensed the Indian masses. The Sikhs of Punjab took exception and initiated a campaign against Indira Gandhi's unlawful rule. They protested by the hundreds, marching out of the Darbar Sahib while singing religious hymns, a centuries-old Sikh practice of civil disobedience that had later been adopted by Mohandas Gandhi during India's independence struggle. In the months that followed, over 40,000 Sikhs were imprisoned for their campaign against Indira Gandhi's national emergency. For their civil disobedience campaign, the Sikhs were vilified by the government-owned media, attacked by the submissive police, and oppressed by the governmental policies. Further complicating the precarious situation, the Sikhs believed their voices were being ignored. A clash with a group called the Nirankari Jata, led by Gurbachan Singh, exemplified the Sikhs' feeling of alienation. Generally, Sikhs consider the Nirankari Jata to be an offshoot tradition that engages in an altered version of the Sikhs' belief, practices and institutions. Tensions between the Sikhs and Nirankaris have been further compounded by evidence linking the Nirankaris to Hindu nationalist groups, which seek to unite the country under a single religious banner by means of manipulation, subversion, or violence. Evidence demonstrates that the Indian government has backed both the Hindu nationalists and the Nirankaris. The tensions between the Sikhs and the Nirankaris peaked on April 13, 1976, a day that holds historical significance for Sikhs and coincides with the Punjabi New Year. The Nirankaris organized a convention in Amritsar. On this date and the day before the gathering, Gurbachan Singh made several comments that offended Sikh practitioners. His mocking of Sikh traditions and scripture resulted in a non-violent protest comprised of members from two distinct groups, the Akhand Kirtani Jata and the Damdami Taksal. 100 unarmed Sikhs marched to the gathering to demonstrate their dissatisfaction with the derogatory comments. According to the eyewitnesses' accounts, the Nirankaris opened fire on the Sikhs with rifles and Sten guns, killing 13 and wounding 78. First-hand reports described that the police reacted to the violence by throwing tear gas at the peacefully protesting Sikhs rather than the Nirankaris. Disturbed by this unjust and unwarranted aggression and a larger pattern of governmentally sanctioned discrimination, the Sikhs requested that those responsible for the gunfire receive the appropriate legal reprimand. The Sikhs also appealed for protection against the discretion of the Sikh scripture, the Guru Granth Sahib. To appease these impassioned campaigns by the Sikhs, the state charged Gurbachan Singh and complicit Nirankaris with murder. However, the charges against Gurbachan Singh never reached the proper court in Punjab. He posted bail and his case was transferred to the neighbouring state of Haryana. Furthermore, the judge for the case released the accused Nirankaris on the grounds that they have acted in self-defense. These two decisions infuriated the Sikhs and supplemented suspicions that Gurbachan Singh and his followers had the full support of powerful government officials and the Punjab police. As Ranbir Singh Sandhu stated in the book Struggle for Justice, every attempt was made to avoid punishing the guilty. Instead of apprehending those who had committed heinous crimes, the local authority escorted them safely out of the state. The second Nirankari Sikh clash in the September of 1978 further demonstrated police involvement in the tension, as with the Amritsar clash on April 13th of the same year. Unarmed Sikhs were peacefully protesting what they considered to be offensive comments made by the Nirankaris when the police opened fire on a Sikh gathering. 12 Sikhs were killed in this incident and several others were injured. Due to this unabated violence, tremors of resentments began to emerge amongst the Sikhs. Some began to protest that the Indian government was denying freedoms guaranteed by Article 3 of the Indian Constitution, the right to life, liberty and security of person. Others argued that the judiciary proved as corrupt and dysfunctional as the executive and legislative branches. The denial of justice had to an increasing number of peaceful protests and a gradually increasing exasperation against governmental hegemony. After being defeated in the 1977 election, Indira Gandhi returned to power in 1980 and methodically placed the Congress party in control of each of the state assemblies, state by state. Punjab's Akali government was dissolved and replaced by Gandhi's sycophant, Darbar Singh, who became the Chief Minister of Punjab. In order to win the votes of the Punjabi Hindu population, Mrs. Gandhi strategically fomented hostility between the Hindus and the Sikhs. Her regime portrayed the Sikh as a violent, anti-national, untrustworthy people. This propaganda unified the Indian masses against the Sikhs, who rallied around Mrs. Gandhi's political campaign while keeping the agitators for decentralization divided. In response to the misinformation campaign, the Sikhs launched another non-violent counter-campaign and publicly exposed the individual policy and political leaders responsible for the violence. Between 1982 and 1983, Hindu-Sikh tensions escalated exponentially. The government endorsed and instigated violence between the two communities. Ranbir Singh Sandhu describes the situation in the following lines. To brand devout Sikhs as criminals, the government stage managed numerous crimes. The police would orchestrate a crime and then ascribe it to Sant Bhindranwale. Following this, the law enforcement agencies would round up devout Sikhs and harass, torture, rape, and often eliminate them. As the government was gaining strength from the newly fashioned anti-Sikh supporters, a religious leader, Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale, launched a campaign demanding recognition of minority rights and decentralization of people from the Indian government. Jarnail Singh's stance was found on the demands of the Anandpur Sahib resolution. Unanimously ratified by a Sikh United Front, The demands included a minimum wage for poor workers, great autonomy for all Indian states, and recognition of the Sikhs as a distinct community. In essence, the stipulation of the Anandpur Sahib resolution sought social policy changes that would uplift the status of millions of Indians without disrupting political, economic, or social harmony. In November of 1983, even Mrs. Gandhi wrote a letter to Jarnail Singh praising his novel ideas and views on social issues. With social change as their platform, the Sikh petitioned for recognition of the demands of the Anandpur Sahib resolution and resolved to continue their peaceful protests until these conditions were met. In advocating such social change, Jarnail Singh developed a large following, primarily consisting of rural youth affected by the government's discriminatory policies against Punjab. These young Sikhs were distressed by the political oppression, the lack of forum to address grievances and effect change, and the poverty that the government's rule had brought to Punjab. These poor Punjabi farmers wanted to implement change in the federal government for a legitimate chance at economic and social success. Challenged by the rising political power and unity of Sikhs, Mrs. Gandhi and the Congress party sought to suppress two of the key representatives of the Sikh, Jarnail Singh and the Anandpur Sahib resolution. The Indian government employed national and international media to malign both entities as symbols of extremists and secessionism that posed a considerable threat to the Indian nation. Contrary to the government's propaganda, Jarnail Singh was not asking for a separate nation. In fact, on May 11, 1983, he explicitly stated, "How can a nation which has sacrificed so much for the freedom of the country want it fragmented?" William Stevens of the New York Times examined the government's propaganda and believed it to be a method of legitimizing the government's attack. Stevens wrote, "One possible explanation advanced for the government's rising of Khalistan questions is that it needs to justify the killings in Amritsar and the invasions of the Sikhs' holiest shrine. In this way, misrepresentations regarding Jarnail Singh and the Anandpur Sahib resolution further inflated the anti-Sikh sentiment that the Congress had been brewing for years. Furthermore, although the crime rate in Punjab was low in relation to the other Indian states, the perception of an environment ripe with danger and fear was amplified. In order to gain public consent for state-sponsored oppression as a result of convincing the common person that repressive laws were necessary for each citizen's safety, the government and the Punjab police received public sanction for their actions. During this time, acts of violence that occurred against Hindus, whether staged by government or perpetrated by independent parties, were generally attributed to Jarnail Singh. These accusations solidified the divide between the Hindus and the Sikh community and eased the passage of anti-Sikh legislation. Independent investigative team has found that these acts of violence were in fact customarily staged by the Indian government to justify the terrorism soon to be unleashed against the Sikhs. As a senior officer in Punjab's capital city, stated in India Today on December 31st, 1983, "It's really shocking that we have so little against him, Jarnail Singh, while we keep blaming him for all sorts of things. Yet the divide and conquer strategy was central to gaining political support of the Hindu population of northern India. So the propaganda vilifying the Sikhs and Jarnail Singh persisted." Between 1981 and 1984, Indian security forces murdered hundreds of Sikhs in fake encounters, a euphemism for the extrajudicial execution of individuals. The forces used the tension between the government and the Sikh as a pretense for unbridling police power. Over 1 lakh Sikhs courted arrest during this period as they peacefully demanded the rights and liberties guaranteed to all Indian citizens. A report by the Citizens for Democracy explains, The ruling political party set up organizations to promote divisions within the Sikh religion, encouraged insult and abuse of leaders and founders of the faith, and interfered in religious matters. To preserve their identity, the Sikhs agitated for increased state autonomy, constitutional amendment to recognize their religion as separate from Hindu, and certain territorial and river water rights. The government treated their peaceful protest as sedition, demand for recognition of their religion as secessionism, confirmation in their religion as separatism, wearing of the external symbols of their religion as extremism, and bearing of arms required for all Amritdhari Sikhs as terrorism and armed insurrection. In 1982, Jarnail Singh moved into the Guru Nanak Niwas, an extension of Darbar Sahib complex, and the following year he shifted it to the complex itself. Indira Gandhi responded to the increased pressure of Sikh demands such as the Anandpur Sahib resolution by declaring President's rule in 1983 in Punjab, which allowed her to disband the elected Punjab government and replace it with her personal staff. The report Dead Silence, The Legacy of Abuses in Punjab, produced by Human Rights Watch and Physicians for Human Rights, criticized these moves. The arbitrary manner in which President's rule have been invoked in Punjab and other states had led critics to observe that it has become a tool for purely partisan purposes. Mrs. Gandhi claimed that the country was in a state of emergency and suspended civil rights laws as she had done with the infamous national emergency in 1975. Only a few months separated Indira Gandhi and her Congress from the largest genocide in the history of modern India. Thank you so much for listening to this audiobook. The rest of the chapters are in my next videos.